It starts without warning, a flutter in your lower eyelid, small, rapid, persistent. It feels enormous, like your whole face must be moving. You're certain everyone in the room can see it. So you check a mirror and there's nothing there, nothing visible at all. Whatever is happening entirely on the inside, and you can't make it start, you can't make it stop, and you have no idea what it is. Millions of people search for an explanation for this every year, and almost none of them come away with the actual name for it. So here it is. It's called myokemia, from the Greek myo, meaning muscle, and chema, meaning wave, a wave passing through muscle, which is a surprisingly accurate description of what's physically happening under your skin. To understand it, you need to know about the muscle involved because it's an unusual one. The orbicularis oculi is a thin sheet of muscle that encircles your eye completely, forming a ring around the socket. It's what closes your eyelids. Every blink you've ever made was this muscle contracting around 15 to 20,000 times a day, every day for your entire life. And it's thin, extraordinarily thin. In places, the orbicularis oculi is less than a millimeter thick, and the skin covering your eyelid is the thinnest skin anywhere on your body. That combination matters because it explains something odd about the twitch, why you feel it so intensely while nobody else can see anything. There's almost nothing between that muscle and your nerve endings. No fat layer, no thick dermis, nothing to dampen the sensation. When a small number of muscle fibers contract in your thigh, you don't notice there's too much tissue in the way and too little sensory density. When the same thing happens in your eyelid, it's happening directly against some of the most sensitive tissue you have, right beside the eye itself, which your brain monitors more closely than almost anything else. So the sensation gets amplified enormously relative to the actual physical movement. You feel a tremor. What's actually occurring is a movement measured in fractions of a millimeter. Your brain is treating a tiny mechanical event as significant because of where it's happening, not because of how large it is. Now what's causing the contraction itself? Your muscles aren't controlled fiber by fiber. They're organized into motor units, a single motor neuron, and all the muscle fibers it connects to. When that neuron fires, every fiber in its unit contracts together. Large muscles like the quadriceps have motor units containing hundreds or even thousands of fibers, which is why they produce force, but not precision. The orbicularis oculi is the opposite. Its motor units are among the smallest in the entire body, sometimes just a handful of fibers per neuron. That's what gives you the extraordinary fine control you have over your eyelids, the ability to blink one eye, to squint slightly, to close them with barely any force. Precision requires small motor units, and that precision is exactly what makes the twitch possible. When a single small motor unit begins firing spontaneously, misfiring repeatedly without any signal from your brain, it produces a visible ripple in the surrounding tissue because there's so little muscle mass around it to absorb the movement. In a large muscle, one rogue motor unit disappears into the bulk. In your eyelid, it's the only thing happening. This is the crucial point about myokemia, and it's why nothing you do makes any difference. The misfire isn't coming from your brain. It's happening at the level of the motor neuron itself or at the junction where it meets the muscle. There is no signal from your cortex to cancel because your cortex was never involved. You have no conscious pathway to the individual motor unit that's malfunctioning. You can't reach it. Which is why every intervention people try is essentially ineffective. Rubbing your eye doesn't stop it. Blinking hard doesn't stop it. Pressing on the eyelid may interrupt it briefly through mechanical pressure, but it resumes. There's no technique because there's nothing to apply a technique to. The only thing that reliably ends an episode is the motor neuron settling down on its own. So what makes it misfire in the first place? The triggers are consistent, well documented, and unglamorous. Fatigue is the strongest. A sleep-deprived nervous system has generally elevated excitability, and motor neurons become more likely to fire spontaneously. Stress produces the same effect through sustained sympathetic activation. Caffeine directly increases neuronal excitability and is one of the most reliable triggers there. Screen time contributes, though indirectly. Looking at a screen substantially reduces your blink rate from around 15 blinks a minute down to as few as 5. That leaves your eyes drier and the surface more irritated, and the orbicularis oculi ends up working differently through the day. Dry eye on its own is an established trigger for eyelid myokemia. Alcohol is another, both directly and through the disrupted sleep that follows. And you'll see magnesium deficiency mentioned constantly online as the cause, which is worth addressing directly. The evidence for it is weak. Multivitamin magnesium deficiency can cause muscle irritability, but it's uncommon in people eating an ordinary diet. And there's little good evidence that supplementing helps typical eyelid twitching. It's a satisfying explanation because it comes with an action you can take, which is probably why it persists. The honest answer is that the common triggers are tiredness, stress, and caffeine, which is to say the twitch is usually a fairly reliable signal that you're running your nervous system harder than it wants to be run. Why the lower this is one of the more frequently asked questions, and the answer is partly unsatisfying. Both lids can twitch, but the lower is affected considerably more often. The likely explanation involves differences in how the two are innervated and the fact that the lower lid has less structural support. The upper lid contains a firmer connective tissue plate called the tarsal plate, which is thicker and better anchored. Less structural damping means a small contraction produces a more noticeable ripple. How long does it last? Anywhere from a few seconds to several weeks. Most episodes resolve within a few days. Some people get a twitch that returns intermittently over a longer period, disappearing for a while and coming back when they're run down. This is normal, benign, and not a sign of anything wrong. There are two conditions worth distinguishing it from, though, because they're genuinely different and they do warrant attention. The first is benign essential blepharospasm. Unlike myokemia, this involves both eyes, and it produces forceful, involuntary closure rather than a fine flutter. The eyelids clamp shut, sometimes hard enough to interfere with vision, driving, and reading. It's a neurological movement disorder rather than a local misfire, and it's usually treated with botulinum toxin injections. The second is hemifacial spasm. This affects one side of the face only, and it starts around the eye before gradually spreading downward to involve the cheek and mouth. The usual cause is a blood vessel pressing against the facial nerve where it exits the brainstem. It progresses over time rather than resolving, and it needs proper investigation. So the guidance is straightforward. A fine flutter in one eyelid that comes and goes is myokemia and needs nothing. If the twitching spreads beyond the eyelid to other parts of your face, if both eyes are forcefully closing, if it persists continuously for more than a few weeks, or if it comes with a drooping eyelid, changes in vision, or any other neurological symptom, that's worth getting looked at. Those are different things, wearing a similar disguise. What myokemia reveals in the end is something you almost never have access to, the individual components of your own motor system. You experience your muscles as things you command. Lift the arm and it lifts. But underneath that experience is an enormous population of motor units firing and resetting continuously, managed entirely below the level of anything you'd call a decision. The twitch is one of those units becoming briefly audible. It's not a malfunction in any meaningful sense. Nothing is broken, nothing is damaged. It's a single small piece of an enormous automatic system doing something slightly out of sequence in the one place on your body, thin enough and sensitive enough for you to notice. So it has a name. It's a motor unit misfiring somewhere in a muscle a millimeter thick in a system you have no conscious access to. It'll stop when it stops. And the fact that it's driving you mad while being completely invisible to everyone around you is, in its way, the most accurate thing about it. Next episode, the loud bang some people hear in their head at the moment they fall asleep. It has no external source. It's generated entirely inside the brain, and it has one of the most alarming names in medicine, exploding head syndrome, for something that turns out to be completely harmless.